New York City is the largest city in the United States, and one of the largest cities in the world by population. New York is known for its pizza, architecture, way of speaking, as well as being the set of countless famous movies, such as The Godfather, Home Alone 2, Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, Into the Spider-Verse, more Spider-Man movies, as well as the Supermans, Avengers Endgame. You get the point. New York is also known by the more scholarly types, such as you and I, for its history. And considering its history, it's pretty insane that all of this got to where it is today. All of the inventions, landmarks, and overall cultural impact of New York and North America would not be possible without beavers. First, let's look at some history. North and South America are vastly different continents. For an upstarting European empire, South America is like heaven. From South America, you could get access to lucrative markets such as the sugar, coffee, cocoa, spice, gold, and silver industries. But after Columbus discovered the Americas, Spain and Portugal jumped on the continent, swallowing up most of the region and forming monopolies over the resources there. Which is great, except if you were literally anyone else. So you had two options. 1. Piracy. Ships coming from New Spain and Brazil were loaded with shiny rocks. And why spend money on what you could steal? So England and the Netherlands resorted to piracy, robbing Portuguese and Spanish ships of their cargo. 2. North America. The European powers, including the English and the Dutch, decided to just take what they could get and colonize North America, despite the continent having a fraction of the resource output of North America. So, say you were a settler, fresh off the boat from Europe. How will you get resources before the discovery of oil, natural gas, and large-scale mining? There is agricultural land, but we have a lot of that back home. And sure, there was cotton, tobacco, and tomatoes, but if that's all, that's pretty puny compared to South America's stuff. The one thing North America had that South America didn't was the beaver. There were many animals that were hunted and trapped for their furs, such as foxes, lynx, beaver, and otters. Beavers were just the most high demand of the group, and are synonymous with the fur trade. Long ago, the Europeans had beavers of their own, but demand for beaver clothing such as hats and vests had caused them to be hunted to near extinction. With the colonization of North America, a new species of beaver was discovered, the North American beaver. With demand for beaver reinvigorated, the fur trade took off. Today, we will look individually into the fur trade for each country that participated in the fur trade, and the many wars that took place. The French were among the first countries to settle the North American continent, with the foundation of New France in 1608. The colony was built on the fur trade, with many trading posts established throughout the colony for furs. French settlers and trappers soon moved into the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley regions. Only in Ohio. Not funny. The leader of the French colony, Samuel de Champlain, oriented the colony to meeting French interests, including the fur trade. De Champlain befriended the native tribes in the region, including the Algonquin, Huron, and Montmagny tribes, to continue the supply of furs. Employing Native Americans will become a recurring theme throughout this video. As the fur trade grew, so did the colony, expanding into Quebec, beyond the Ohio Valley, down the Mississippi River to Louisiana, founding New Orleans, whose French culture and influence is still very apparent and celebrated to this day. Royal charters were established and many fur companies were formed and began competing, both with each other as well as outside competition from the English, who began raiding French settlements along the St. Lawrence River. These raids increased competition further, as well as wars being ignited. The most famous of these wars, the Beaver Wars, were launched by the Iroquois. The Iroquois launched attacks on the fur-trading middlemen used by the Europeans. The Wendake, or Wendake, I don't know how to pronounce that, please don't crucify me, region was used by the Cree and Ojibwa tribes to trade furs to the Europeans. The Iroquois launched attacks on this area, officially starting the Beaver Wars. They were called the Beaver Wars because the wars were a series of raids lasting from 1639 to 1649, including attacks on French canoes transporting pelts. And after the Iroquois took all of this land, and both sides were devastated by smallpox. The Beaver Wars made the fur trade less profitable for France. In order to regain some of that profitability, France built forts along the border with the 13 colonies in order to prevent the British from expanding west. The British raided these forts, and things escalated greatly into the 7 Years' War, where England took control of all French possessions in Canada. After that, France regained Louisiana after the Napoleonic Wars, but the fur trade wasn't as profitable, and they eventually sold the colony to the United States. The U.S. also had a fur trade, with most of the North being established thanks to the fur trade. America's own fur trade continued further west, with fur operations spreading from the Ozarks to the Cascades. A lot of westward expansion was actually thanks to the fur trade. Many towns were founded in the Rockies as trading posts to trade furs. The U.S. and Britain jointly occupied Oregon so that they both had access to the Columbia River and its surroundings because it was inhabited by trappable animals who have fur. As the trappers, traders, and the peddlers, the politicians, and the settlers came west, demand for the fur trade increased, because there are 4 things people need to survive: food, water, shelter, and clothes. After the American Revolution, America's fur trade began expanding, building on what the British were doing years prior. They trapped the previously mentioned Ohio Valley region. Only in Ohio. I thought I disintegrated you. I drank from this can of plot armor. Hey, give me that. The United States has a very large river network, meaning trappable animals were abundant. Even in the South, where you wouldn't think beavers would live, trappable animals resided as well. As expected, some wars would be started over furs. Part of the reason the Indian Wars of the 19th century happened was over furs. The Yamasee, a native tribe that inhabited the regions of modern-day North and South Carolina, began raiding local towns and trading posts for their furs, as well as to keep them away from tribal lands. But the South Carolinian militias drove them back. As America moved west, so did the fur trade, with new frontiers like the Rocky Mountains and the Midwestern river systems open up. The British also tried to get in on the action, with the British Hudson Bay Company expanding into the northern border states. Competition between the Americans and the British also expanded into the Pacific Northwest, with both wanting access to modern-day Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia because of the lucrative fur trade opportunities, specifically in the area around the Columbia River. After years of back-and-forth squabbling, the British and Americans finally decided to split the area along the 48th parallel, creating the border we know and love today. The American fur trade reached its zenith after the Americans bought Alaska from Russia. For a while, Alaska was the main fur trading area for the Americans, as well as prime gold rush territory. The Yukon River was also used as a highway to transport furs via boats. The Alaskan fur trade is still alive today, but not nearly as prominent. Some people up there trap to survive, selling pelts at pawn shops and the like. All in all, America's fur trade shaped a large part of its history, though they did see competition with both the natives as well as fierce competition from England, Britain, and later Canada. England's first North American colony was the legendary Jamestown, a small settlement of around 200 or so people. The town was the start of what is now Virginia. England began colonizing further, creating the land now known as the 13 Colonies. England's colonies were mainly agricultural, and while American cash crops were sold in England to make money, England's main thing was taxes. If you paid attention in history class, which if you're 95% of the population you probably didn't, you may remember that one of the main reasons America declared independence was because of having too many taxes. Don't know if you guys can hear that. My neighbor's revving up his engine. There was a fur trade in the 13 colonies. Mostly being in New England, but most furs were here, on the southern coast of the Hudson Bay, founded in 1668 by the newly founded Hudson Bay Company, which, when I looked them up, was surprised to find that they are still in operation. And originally, the sentence was supposed to say that they were the oldest company in the world, but it turns out they aren't. The oldest company in the world was founded in the year 576. The Hudson Bay Company, which I'm calling the HBC from now on, continued operation. continued operations separate from the rest of British North America, until a funny thing happened in the Ohio Valley and suddenly Britain and France are at war. 7 years later, Britain now has all of this land in Canada, and the French can go eat crap. Britain continues west, as well as north into all those little islands north of Canada, where beavers and Arctic foxes live. Several trading posts were built across Canada, and the fur trade took off, with the local Native Americans helping out, supplying the HBC with furs in exchange for money. As Canada continued towards the Pacific, the fur trade expanded further, with Victoria on Vancouver Island being founded as a fur trading post and fort. In 1867, when Canada was officially formed, later annexing a big portion of modern-day Canada, the Métis people began the Red River Rebellion, where several Métis communities began revolting against Canada, eventually resulting in the creation of Manitoba, one of many fights between the British and Native Americans. Speaking of Native Americans, as I mentioned in all the previous sections of this video, the Native Americans played a huge part in the fur trade, especially the Métis people. Because of some native tribes opposing the fur trade, I will mention some of the wars that also took place because of the fur trade, though I won't be covering the wars with the natives after the fur trade because those really deserve their own video. Without further ado, let's talk about the Métis. During the days of New France, many French fur trappers married Native American women, and their children became the Métis. The Métis became excellent trappers, and were highly sought after by the HBC as guides and trappers. But all over the continent, Native American tribes used their fur trapping skills for payment from the Europeans, but there was a problem. You know that thing Europeans are known for? It starts with an I and ends with an imperialism. So many Native Americans grew discontented with the Europeans and ignited many wars, one of which was the aforementioned Red River Rebellion, which started after the Northwest Territories were given to Canada. A Métis man named Louis Riel and the village he was in charge of, Red River Colony, began revolting because they didn't want to be a part of Canada. And not like the kid in my 3rd grade class who said he didn't trust Canada, his reasoning being that Canadians were too nice, therefore they must be hiding something, which is pretty dumb, but forgivable because, like I said, 3rd grade. But that won't stop me from making fun of children. After the Red River Colony established a provisional government, which historically has never ended well for anyone, Canada and Red River met an agreement where Red River would be incorporated into Canada as the province of Manitoba. Besides the Métis, other powerful fur trading tribes were the Cree in Canada, the Dakota in the Northern Plains, and the Ojibwa in the Midwest. Natives were a big help in the fur trade for most of the countries involved, except for Russia. Russia's a little more interesting, because for a while in the 1500s, they had a monopoly over the European fur trade due to a large population of Eurasian beavers inhabiting central Russia. But as the populations dwindled, Russia had to look further east, expanding until they reached the coast of the Bering Strait. Somehow, we don't exactly know when Russians first landed in Alaska, but one theory claims that a Russian expedition sailed to Alaska, not knowing it was Alaska, and founded a village. 100 or so years later, some Russians were sailing by and saw a village, and were like, wait, are those guys Russian? What really happened is lost to time, so let's get to the real history. The first known Russian expedition to Russia was made by the ship St. Gabriel in 1732. They would later found a settlement in 1784. Russia was mainly undisturbed in Alaska, save for an exploration by Spain or three. In the mid-19th century, the colony, now called Russian America, began to expand, but contrary to popular belief, they didn't take over all of Alaska, only the southern half. If you're wondering why, well, would you rather live here or here? The colony was mainly just a collection of forts and trading posts, with the fur trade active but not profitable, so Russia was spending more money than it gained on the colony. The final nail in Russian America's coffin came in 1856, with Russia's humiliating defeat in the Crimean War. Russia lost a ton of money on this war, so they sold their Alaskan colony to the United States. The fur trade was a major part of North America's history, and it has had a lasting effect on everyone involved. whether you're Britain, France, the US, Russia, or those other guys. Other countries were involved, but not on nearly as much of a scale as our big 3.5, so I'll mention them here as well. When Florida was still under Spanish control, the Spanish occupiers would trade with the local natives for fox, beaver, and deerskin. They mainly used Florida for growing oranges and selling slaves, though. The Netherlands was originally supposed to have its own segment, but it didn't have as much of a role, so it'll be here instead. The Dutch colonized the area around modern-day New York, then known as the New Netherlands, or New Nederland, which I'll be calling it because the New Netherlands seems like a big tech slogan. Introducing the New Netherlands, a next-gen low country with a processor that can outperform the original Netherlands model. And then they'll probably make your old Netherlands work twice as slow to compel you to buy the new one. Anyways, the Dutch just kind of hung around in New Nederland and traded with the local Native Americans. The Iroquois in the Beaver Wars actually got some of their supplies by trading with the Dutch in what is now Albany, New York. The colony eventually grew unprofitable, so the Dutch sold it to England. New Sweden was originally a trading post. The fur trade played a massive role in North American history, forming nations, lifestyles, and communities that still exist to this day. But it's not just fur. Many U.S. towns were also founded as railroad depots and gold mining camps. If you would like to do some research of your own, I've linked my sources in the description. Thank you for watching, and this has been Playhouse Films.
Vanderlyn, I'm always by your side. Poker plans, I've got a plan, Norbert. Vanderlyn, I'm always by your side. Poker plans, I've got a plan, Norbert.